Emma Johnson never imagined that a simple act of kindness would change her life forever. She was 26 years old and worked long shifts at a small diner in a quiet town outside Chicago. Life wasn't easy. Her rent kept rising, her car was barely running, and most of her paycheck disappeared before the month even ended. Every morning, she walked 3 blocks from her tiny apartment to the diner, and every morning she saw the same homeless man sitting on a bench across the street. His clothes were worn and faded. His gray beard was untrimmed. A weathered backpack sat beside him wherever he went. Most people ignored him. Some avoided looking at him altogether. But Emma noticed something different. The old man never begged. He never asked strangers for money. He simply sat quietly, watching the world move around him. One cold October morning, Emma bought an extra coffee before starting her shift. As she passed the bench, she stopped. "Would you like this?" she asked. The old man looked surprised. "For me?" he asked softly. Emma smiled. "Of course." He accepted the coffee carefully, almost as if it were something precious. "Thank you," he said. His voice was gentle and educated, not what Emma expected. She nodded and continued toward work. That should have been the end of it. But the next morning she brought another coffee, then another. Soon it became a routine. Coffee on Mondays, a breakfast sandwich on Wednesdays, a bowl of soup whenever the weather turned cold. The old man always thanked her, and little by little they began talking. His name was William. He never shared much about his past. Whenever Emma asked where he came from, he would simply smile. That's a long story. Despite his situation, William seemed unusually wise. He spoke about books, history, business, and life lessons that sounded like they came from someone who had lived many different lives. One rainy afternoon, Emma sat beside him during her lunch break. "Can I ask you something?" she said. William chuckled. "You usually do." Emma smiled. "How do you stay positive?" The old man looked toward the gray sky. Then he answered quietly, "Because life can change in a single day. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better." Emma thought about those words for the rest of the afternoon. She had no idea how important they would become, because across the street a black luxury SUV had just parked, and inside it someone was watching William very carefully, someone who clearly knew exactly who he was. William's words stayed in Emma's mind long after that rainy afternoon ended. The next morning, she arrived at the diner before sunrise. The streets were still quiet, and the autumn air carried a sharp chill. As usual, William sat on the old wooden bench across the street, his worn coat pulled tightly around him. Emma crossed over with 2 coffees and a paper bag holding a fresh breakfast sandwich. "You're spoiling me," William joked as she handed him the food. Emma laughed. "If I were spoiling you, there'd be pancakes too." For the first time, she saw a genuine smile spread across his face. It made him look different somehow, younger, happier. Over the following weeks, their friendship grew naturally. Whenever Emma had a break, she would sit with William for a few minutes. Sometimes they talked about books, other times they discussed life. What surprised Emma most was how intelligent he was. One afternoon, she mentioned struggling to pay her bills. William listened carefully. "Most people spend their lives chasing money," he said. "The smart ones learn to make money work for them." Emma raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like something a millionaire would say." For a split second, a strange expression crossed William's face. Then it disappeared. "Maybe I just read too many business magazines," he replied. Emma laughed, but something about his answer felt unusual. Later that week, a storm hit the town. Heavy rain poured from the sky. Most people rushed indoors. When Emma finished her shift, she looked across the street and saw William sitting alone under a bus shelter. Without thinking, she grabbed an extra umbrella and ran through the rain. "Come on," she said. "Where?" "My apartment." William looked shocked. "Emma, that's kind, but people will talk." Emma shrugged. "Let them." An hour later, William sat at her tiny kitchen table drinking hot soup. He looked around the small apartment. The worn furniture, the peeling paint, the stack of overdue bills on the counter. "You work very hard," he said quietly. Emma smiled weakly. "Hard work doesn't always pay enough." William looked at her for a long moment. There was sadness in his eyes, almost guilt, as if he wished he could change something. Before leaving, he stopped at the door. "You're a rare person, Emma. She smiled. You barely know me. William shook his head. No, I think I do. As he walked away into the rainy night, a black luxury sedan slowly pulled away from across the street. Inside the car, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit lowered his phone. I found him, he said. A voice answered immediately. Are you absolutely sure? The man looked toward William, disappearing into the darkness. Yes, he replied. It's him. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man in the black sedan. For the next few days, she noticed the vehicle more than once. It never stayed long. It would appear somewhere nearby, sit quietly for a while, then disappear. William seemed to notice it too. One afternoon, while they sat outside the diner sharing a cup of coffee, Emma decided to ask, Do you know the people in that black car? William's hand froze for a moment. Then he slowly placed his coffee down. Why do you ask? I've seen them watching you. William looked away toward the busy street. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed uncomfortable. Some parts of life have a way of catching up with us, he said quietly. Emma frowned. What does that mean? The old man smiled gently. It means everyone has a past. The answer only created more questions. That evening, Emma finished her shift later than usual. As she locked the diner doors, she noticed William sitting alone beneath a streetlight. Something about him looked different. Tired, worried. She walked over and sat beside him. You okay? William hesitated. Then he nodded. I'm just thinking. About what? For several seconds, he remained silent. Finally, he spoke. Have you ever made a mistake so big that it changed your entire life? Emma looked at him carefully. Everyone has regrets. William laughed softly. Not like mine. His voice carried a sadness Emma had never heard before. Before she could ask another question, a luxury SUV pulled up along the curb. A man in an expensive navy suit stepped out. He looked to be in his early 40s, confident, wealthy, and angry. His eyes locked onto William immediately. There you are. William's face turned pale. Emma stood up instinctively. Who are you? The stranger ignored her. He kept staring at William. We've been looking for you for 3 years. The old man's shoulders slumped, as if he had been expecting this moment. Michael, William said quietly. The man's jaw tightened. Mom is dead. The words hit like a punch. William closed his eyes. Pain flooded his face. For a moment, nobody spoke. Cars passed. People walked by. But the world seemed frozen around them. Emma looked between the two men, completely confused. What's going on? Michael finally looked at her. His expression was cold. You really don't know who he is, do you? Emma shook her head. Michael gave a bitter laugh. Then he pointed directly at William. This homeless man isn't who you think he is. William lowered his head. The shame in his eyes said everything, and as Emma waited for an explanation, she realized the man she had been feeding every day might be hiding a secret far bigger than she had ever imagined. Emma stared at Michael, trying to make sense of what she had just heard. The cold autumn wind moved through the street, but nobody seemed to notice. What are you talking about? She asked. Michael laughed bitterly. You've been bringing him food, haven't you? Buying him coffee, feeling sorry for him? Emma crossed her arms. There's nothing wrong with helping someone. No, Michael replied. But there's something wrong with not knowing who you're helping. William remained silent. His eyes stayed fixed on the sidewalk. That silence worried Emma more than anything. William, she said softly. The old man finally looked up. For the first time since she had met him, she saw genuine shame in his eyes. My full name is William Parker. Michael scoffed. Tell her the rest. William took a slow breath. 20 years earlier, he had built one of the largest commercial construction companies in Illinois. His business had grown from a small family operation into a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Emma blinked. What? She thought she had misunderstood him. But Michael continued. He owned private jets, multiple houses, investments everywhere. Emma looked at the worn coat William was wearing. It made no sense. Then what happened? A painful silence followed. William swallowed hard. I lost sight of what mattered. His voice sounded heavy. Years ago, success had consumed him. He spent more time growing his empire than spending time with his family. Business meetings replaced birthdays. Contracts replaced vacations. Money replaced relationships. By the time he realized what he had sacrificed, the damage was already done. His wife became distant. His children grew resentful. And eventually, his family stopped seeing him as a father and started seeing him as a bank account. Michael's expression hardened. "You make yourself sound like a victim." "I'm not," William replied quietly. The honesty in his voice surprised Emma. Michael stepped closer. "When the company collapsed, everyone disappeared. Investors sued. Partners walked away. The family was left cleaning up the mess." Emma looked at William. "Is that true?" He nodded slowly. "Most of it." The answer wasn't defensive. It was accepting, as if he had spent years carrying the weight of those mistakes. Then Michael pulled out his phone. "There's one thing you still don't know." He opened a photo and handed it to Emma. Her eyes widened. The picture showed William standing beside politicians, celebrities, and business leaders at a luxury event. He looked confident, powerful, nothing like the man sitting on the bench. Emma looked back at William. Her heart was racing. The homeless man she had fed every day wasn't just hiding a difficult past. He had once been one of the richest men in the state, and she had a feeling that wasn't even the biggest secret he was keeping. Emma barely slept that night. After learning that William had once been a wealthy businessman, her mind refused to settle. The image Michael had shown her kept replaying in her head. A confident man standing among powerful people, dressed in an expensive suit, smiling for cameras. It felt impossible to connect that man with the quiet, homeless person she had shared coffee with for months. The next morning, she arrived at the bench earlier than usual. William was already there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emma sat beside him. "You could have told me." William nodded slowly. "I know." "Why didn't you?" He stared at the street ahead. "Because people treat you differently when they know your past." Emma couldn't argue with that. "Did you really lose everything?" William smiled sadly. "Not all at once." His voice was calm, but there was pain underneath every word. He explained how years of bad decisions, lawsuits, failed investments, and personal mistakes slowly destroyed the life he had built. But what hurt most wasn't losing the money. It was losing his family. "The money could have been replaced," he said quietly. "The years I missed with the people I loved couldn't." Emma listened carefully. For the first time, she realized William wasn't proud of who he used to be. He carried regret every day. Just then, a black luxury SUV pulled up beside the curb. Michael stepped out. This time, he wasn't alone. A sharply dressed woman in her late 30s followed him. She wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Her expression was cold. "William," she said. The old man's face tightened. "Rachel." Emma immediately understood. "Another family member." Rachel crossed her arms. "We've been searching for months." William sighed. "You found me." "Because someone saw you here." Michael looked toward Emma. "People talk." Rachel's eyes moved to Emma and then back to William. "You've embarrassed this family enough." Emma felt anger rise inside her. "Embarrassed?" The man sitting beside her looked tired and lonely, not dangerous. William remained calm. "What do you want?" Rachel handed him a document. "We need your signature." William glanced at the papers. His expression changed instantly. For the first time, Emma saw genuine shock. "What is this?" "The sale agreement," Rachel replied. William looked up. "You sold the lake house?" "It wasn't your decision anymore." The color drained from his face. That house wasn't just property. It was where his wife had wanted to retire. Where family vacations had happened. Where some of his happiest memories still lived. And judging by the pain in his eyes, Emma realized something important. Despite everything William had lost, there were still things his family was trying to take away. The lake house haunted William for days. Emma could see it every time she looked at him. The cheerful conversations they once shared became shorter. His smile appeared less often. Even when she brought him coffee, he seemed distracted, lost somewhere in the memories Rachel had stirred up. One chilly evening, Emma found him sitting alone by the river that ran through town. The water reflected the orange glow of the setting sun. She sat beside him without saying a word. For several minutes, they simply watched the water flow. Finally, William spoke. "My wife loved that lake house." Emma listened quietly. We bought it when Michael was 10, he continued. Every summer the whole family would spend weeks there. A faint smile crossed his face. For a little while everything felt perfect. What happened? William sighed. I kept believing there would always be more time. Emma felt those words hit her harder than she expected. More time. People always assumed they had it, until they didn't. The business became my priority, William said. Every year I promised my family I'd slow down next year. He laughed bitterly. Next year never came. The sadness in his voice was impossible to ignore. Before Emma could respond, William suddenly grabbed his chest. His face twisted with pain. William? He tried to answer but couldn't. His breathing became shallow. Panic flooded Emma's body. William! She immediately pulled out her phone and called 911. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the town. Paramedics rushed to the scene. As they lifted William onto a stretcher, he reached for Emma's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were focused on her. Don't leave, he whispered. Emma nodded. I'm right here. At the hospital, doctors worked for nearly an hour before anyone spoke to her. The waiting room felt endless. Finally, a doctor approached. Are you family? Emma hesitated. No. The doctor looked surprised. He's been asking for you. A few minutes later, she entered William's hospital room. He looked smaller somehow, fragile. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed his age, 72, tired, human. William gave her a weak smile. You stayed. Of course I stayed. His eyes filled with emotion. Then he slowly reached toward the bedside table. There was a small worn envelope sitting there. Emma, he said quietly, if something happens to me, there's something I need you to have. Emma looked at the envelope, then back at William. A strange feeling settled in her chest, because whatever was inside that envelope, it clearly meant far more than money. Emma visited the hospital every day. Some mornings, she stopped by before work. Other days, she came late at night after finishing a long shift at the diner. No matter how tired she was, she always made time for William. The nurses had started recognizing her. You're his daughter? One nurse asked. Emma smiled. No. The nurse looked surprised. You could have fooled us. That answer stayed with Emma longer than she expected. Inside the room, William looked stronger than he had a few days earlier. The color had returned to his face, and he was even reading a book when she arrived. Look at you, Emma said. You actually look alive again. William laughed softly. I'll take that as a compliment. For a while, they talked about simple things, the weather, the diner, and the people passing by outside the hospital window. It felt normal. Then the door opened. Michael and Rachel entered. The atmosphere changed instantly. Neither of them greeted Emma. Rachel's eyes immediately landed on the flowers Emma had brought. More gifts? She asked coldly. Emma ignored the comment. William, however, didn't. That's enough, Rachel. Rachel crossed her arms. No, Dad. I'm just trying to understand why this stranger suddenly became the most important person in your life. The room fell silent. William looked disappointed. Emma has shown me more kindness in 1 year than I've seen in a long time. Michael shook his head. Or maybe she's smart. Emma stared at him. What is that supposed to mean? Michael laughed bitterly. You know exactly what I mean. William's expression hardened. Stop! But years of resentment were pouring out now. Rachel stepped forward. You think people don't know who you are? Dad, half the town knows by now. Emma felt insulted. You think I'm here because of money? Neither sibling answered. Their silence was answer enough. For the first time since meeting them, Emma felt genuinely angry. I bought William coffee when I thought he had nothing, she said firmly. I sat with him when everyone ignored him. If I cared about money, I picked the worst homeless man in Illinois. Even William laughed at that. The tension briefly broke. After Michael and Rachel left, the room became quiet again. William stared at the ceiling for several moments. They weren't always like this. Emma sat beside him. I know. His eyes moved toward the small envelope on the bedside table, then back to her. Promise me something. What? If anything happens to me, don't let other people tell you who I was. Emma frowned. What do you mean? William gave her a sad smile. because everyone remembers a different version of me." Then he gently pushed the envelope toward her. "And that letter contains the truth." Emma slipped the sealed envelope into her purse before leaving the hospital. She hadn't opened it. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the promise she had made to William. "If something happens to me..." She refused to believe those words would become reality. Over the next several days, William seemed to improve. His doctors were encouraged by his progress. He joked with the nurses, read newspapers, and even teased Emma for bringing him healthy food instead of the cheeseburgers he loved. "I survived 72 years, he laughed. "A burger won't finish the job." Emma rolled her eyes. "That's exactly what someone recovering from a heart attack shouldn't say." Their laughter filled the room. For a brief moment, life felt normal again. Then, late one Friday evening, Emma's phone rang while she was cleaning tables after closing the diner. The caller ID read St. Mary's Hospital. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. She answered immediately. "Hello?" "Miss Johnson," a nurse said gently. "Mr. Parker's condition has suddenly worsened. You should come as soon as you can." Emma didn't even change out of her uniform. She grabbed her coat and drove through the empty streets as rain pounded against her windshield. When she reached the hospital, doctors and nurses were rushing in and out of William's room. She caught a glimpse of Michael standing in the hallway, his face pale and his eyes red. Rachel sat in a chair, silently crying into her hands. No one argued anymore. No one cared about old resentments. The doctor finally stepped outside. "We did everything we could." Emma felt her knees weaken before she even heard the next words. "I'm so sorry. Mr. Parker passed away peacefully a few minutes ago." The hallway became completely silent. Emma walked slowly into the room. William looked peaceful, as though he had simply fallen asleep after a long journey. She gently placed her hand over his. "Thank you," she whispered through tears, "for trusting me and for reminding me that kindness still matters." 3 days later, the church was filled beyond capacity. Former employees, neighbors, veterans, business owners, teachers, and families from across the state came to honor William Parker. One after another, they shared stories of scholarships he had quietly funded, medical bills he had secretly paid, and struggling families he had helped without ever asking for recognition. Emma realized that William's greatest legacy wasn't the fortune he had once built. It was the lives he had changed. As the service ended, a distinguished man in a dark suit approached her. "Miss Emma Johnson?" She nodded. He extended his hand. "My name is David Wilson. I'm William Parker's attorney." He paused before continuing. "Mr. Parker left very specific instructions for me to meet with you tomorrow morning." Emma froze. She had no idea that the next meeting would reveal a secret capable of changing her entire life forever. The following morning, Emma barely touched her breakfast. David Wilson's business card sat on the kitchen table beside William's unopened envelope. She looked at both several times before finally picking them up and leaving for the law office. The building overlooked downtown Chicago with polished marble floors and glass walls that reflected the morning sunlight. Emma suddenly felt out of place in her simple waitress uniform and worn sneakers. A receptionist greeted her warmly. "Miss Johnson, Mr. Wilson is expecting you." She followed her down a quiet hallway until they reached a large conference room. David Wilson stood as she entered. "Thank you for coming." Emma sat across from him. "I still don't understand why William wanted to see me." David folded his hands. "Before we discuss his estate, there's something Mr. Parker asked me to give you." He slid a small leather journal across the table. Emma recognized it immediately. William had often carried it inside his old backpack. "He wrote in this almost every day," David explained. "His instructions were very clear. This belongs to you." Emma gently opened the first page. In William's familiar handwriting were the words, "If you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to tell you everything." Her eyes immediately filled with tears. David waited respectfully before continuing. "William spoke about you many times during the past year." Emma looked surprised. "He did?" David nodded. "He said you were the first person in years who treated him with kindness before knowing his name." Emma lowered her eyes. "I only brought him coffee." David smiled gently. To him, it meant much more. Just then, the conference room door opened. Michael and Rachel walked inside with their attorney. Neither looked pleased to see Emma. Rachel stopped in her tracks. "What is she doing here?" David remained calm. "Miss Johnson was personally invited." Michael frowned. "This meeting is for family." David looked directly at him. "According to your father's written instructions, Miss Johnson is required to be present before I can read the will." The room fell silent. Rachel exchanged a nervous glance with Michael. Emma could feel the tension growing. David opened a large folder containing William Parker's final will. "This document was signed 6 months ago," he said. He looked at everyone before reading the first page aloud. William had left generous donations to hospitals, veterans organizations, children's education funds, and several local charities that had helped homeless people. Emma smiled. That sounded exactly like the man she had come to know. Then David turned another page. His expression became more serious. "The next section concerns William Parker's personal estate." Michael leaned forward. Rachel held her breath. Emma wasn't expecting anything at all. David looked directly at her before speaking. "And this is where everything changes." David adjusted his glasses and looked around the conference room before continuing. "The remaining portion of William Parker's estate will be distributed according to his final written wishes." The room fell silent. Michael leaned forward with confidence. Rachel folded her hands, expecting to hear her father's wealth divided between the two of them. Emma sat quietly. She still couldn't understand why she had been invited. David unfolded the last document. "In addition to charitable donations, Mr. Parker's estate includes investment accounts, commercial properties, retirement funds, and other financial assets." He paused. "The total estimated value is approximately $12 million. Rachel smiled for the first time that morning. Michael exchanged a satisfied glance with his attorney. Then David read the next sentence. "To my children, Michael and Rachel, I leave the lake house and all personal family photographs because memories should never belong to strangers." Michael nodded. That sounded reasonable, but David wasn't finished. He turned to the final page. His voice became steady and deliberate. "The remainder of my estate, including my investment portfolio, savings, company shares, and all remaining financial assets, shall be transferred to Emma Johnson." Silence. No one moved. Emma blinked, convinced she had heard him incorrectly. "I'm sorry, what?" David looked directly at her. "You were named as the sole beneficiary of the remaining estate." Rachel shot to her feet. "This is insane!" Michael slammed his hand on the conference table. "She manipulated him." Emma stood as well, her face flushed with shock. "No, I didn't even know he had money." David calmly lifted another sealed envelope. "I anticipated this reaction." He held it up. "Mr. Parker left a signed letter to be read only if his family questioned Emma's integrity." Rachel froze. David broke the seal and began reading. "To my children, if you are angry with Emma, your anger is directed at the wrong person." The room fell silent again. "Emma never asked me for $1. She offered me coffee when she believed I owned nothing. She sat beside me when others crossed the street to avoid me. She listened without judgment and reminded me what genuine kindness looks like." Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. David continued, "This inheritance is not payment for friendship. Friendship cannot be bought. It is my final opportunity to place my life's work in the hands of someone whose character I trust more than my own success." Michael lowered his eyes. Rachel said nothing. For the first time since entering the room, neither of them had an argument. Emma wiped a tear. She hadn't expected gratitude. She never expected $12 million. But more than the fortune, William had left her something priceless. Proof that the smallest act of kindness can become the most meaningful legacy a person leaves behind. Emma couldn't bring herself to deposit the inheritance. For nearly 2 weeks, the documents remained untouched inside a folder on her kitchen table. Every time she looked at them, she remembered William sitting on the old bench outside the diner, smiling over a simple cup of coffee. $12 million had changed her bank account. It hadn't changed her heart. One afternoon, David Wilson called. "Miss Johnson, there are still a few matters Mr. Parker wanted completed." Emma agreed to meet him. When she arrived at his office, David placed a small wooden box on the conference table. "This wasn't part of the will," he explained. "Mr. Parker instructed me to give it to you 30 days after his passing." Emma slowly opened the lid. Inside were an old wristwatch, a faded family photograph, and a folded handwritten letter. She unfolded the letter carefully. Dear Emma, if you're reading this, you've probably spent weeks wondering why I trusted you with my fortune. The truth is simple. You earned my trust long before you knew I had anything to give. Money can build buildings, but it can't build character. I learned that lesson too late. If this inheritance changes your lifestyle, that's fine. But I hope it never changes your kindness. The greatest investment I ever made wasn't in business. It was believing that good people still exist. You proved I was right. One last request. Visit the lake house. There's something waiting there that belongs to you now. Thank you for giving an old man his dignity back. William. Emma wiped away a tear. She looked at the faded family photograph again. For the first time, she noticed something written on the back in faded ink. Home isn't a place, it's the people who make you feel seen. The next weekend, Emma drove to the lake house alone. The cabin looked exactly as William had described it. Quiet, peaceful, timeless. She unlocked the front door using the key David had provided. Dust floated through the afternoon sunlight. Everything had been left almost exactly as it was years earlier. On the fireplace mantel sat another envelope with her name written across the front. Beneath it rested a framed photograph of William, Susan, Michael, and Rachel during happier days. Emma slowly picked up the envelope. Before opening it, she looked around the silent cabin. For the first time since William's funeral, she smiled. She realized his greatest gift had never been the $12 million. It was the chance to help heal a family that had forgotten what truly mattered. Emma carried the final envelope onto the porch overlooking the quiet lake. The water shimmered beneath the evening sun, just as William had described during their conversations on the park bench. For the first time, she understood why this place had always remained in his heart. She carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Dear Emma, if you've reached this moment, then you've honored every promise you made to me. I knew you would. People will say I left you $12 million. They will be wrong. What I really left you was a choice. You can spend this money chasing comfort, or you can spend your life creating hope for people who feel forgotten. I spent decades building wealth. You taught me that a warm meal, a listening ear, and genuine compassion are worth far more than any fortune. Please don't remember me as the businessman who lost everything. Remember me as the old man who found one true friend when he needed one most. Live well. Love generously. And whenever you pass someone the world has ignored, remember that every person has a story you cannot see. Thank you for giving me peace before I said goodbye. Your grateful friend, William Parker. Emma lowered the letter and quietly wiped away her tears. She finally understood why William had trusted her. Not because she was perfect. Not because she expected nothing in return, but because kindness had come naturally to her when no one was watching. Several months later, the old diner looked different. A small sign near the entrance read, William Parker Community Kitchen. No one eats alone. Every evening, volunteers served free meals to anyone who walked through the doors. No questions. No judgment. Just kindness. Emma had also created scholarships for hardworking students and emergency funds for families facing difficult times, fulfilling the vision William had written about in his letter. One Saturday afternoon, Michael and Rachel quietly walked into the community kitchen. Emma welcomed them with a warm smile. There was no bitterness left between them, only understanding. Together, they shared a simple meal at the same wooden table where William had once enjoyed his first cup of coffee from Emma. Outside, a young homeless man hesitated near the entrance. Emma walked over and smiled. Are you hungry? The man nodded. Then come inside, she said. There's always a place for one more. As he stepped through the door, Emma looked toward the empty bench across the street. For just a moment, she could almost picture William smiling back. His fortune had changed her future, but his friendship had changed her life. And that became the greatest inheritance of all.